Welcome. We're glad you're here. Sorry for the technical delays. My name is Rick Durfee. I'm the senior attorney of the Durfee Law Group. We're based out of Phoenix. We represent people all over the U.S. and in a lot of other countries as well. We focus primarily on multi-generational planning for families, which includes both estate planning, business planning, asset protection planning, tax planning, charitable planning, all kinds of planning. And we're excited to be here. I've actually been speaking at the FreedomFest since it started. I love this. It's one of my favorite events all year long. By law, I am required to tell you that nothing I say can be used to lie, cheat, or steal from the IRS. You have to pay your taxes. Listening to me is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's why that's up there. So I want you to think about this. Wow, is that the biggest that gets? The title of this talk today is Live Well, Leave a Legacy. What the heck does it mean to live well, especially at a conference like FreedomFest where we're focusing on freedom? Does that mean the ability to make our own decisions, to be able to provide for our own needs, to be independent from interference by government or third parties, to have the resources we need, and on and on and on? What the heck does that live well piece mean? And I think a significant question that follows up with that is, even if we achieve that live well independence for ourselves, are we able to transfer that to the future? And the planning ideas we're going to talk about today, I want to emphasize a couple of things. It's been my experience that if we get too deep into details at an event like this, people's eyes glaze over and they fall asleep and they get bored to death and they go away not really any better off than when they started. So I want to focus on principles, some ideas, and we're going to talk about some strategies, some very specific things that can be employed to both live well and leave a legacy. And these principles and strategies can be adapted to wherever you happen to be in your life, whatever your family situation is, whatever your financial situation is. So for those of you who have no children, these same principles can be adapted for that. For those of you that have a big brood of kids and lots of grandkids, they can be adapted for that. For those of you that have a very simple estate, it'll work for that. For those that have complicated business and property issues, it'll work for that. So, and by the way, I'm going to leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So if you have questions, think about them. And I'm going to add this one thing. As we sit here today, we're going to spend the next 50 minutes together. We don't want that to be a waste of time. Here's how it to be valuable for you and me both. During the course of this time when we visit together, you're going to have some ideas come into your mind. I really should, and then something's going to come into your mind, whatever that is, and it'll be different for each of you. Whatever that is, I encourage you, write it down so you can remember it, and then do that, whatever it is. So with that, I want to kind of begin with this money thing. Here we are at Freedom Fest. We talk about politics and government and policies and our personal lives. We're looking at how do I make my personal financial life fit into all the turmoil and chaos and volatility that we see in the world around me? How do I plan for the future? And a couple of things about money. Everybody wants it. People who say they don't want money will lie about other stuff. But not everybody's able to make it. It's hard to make it. And even if you're able to make it, it's hard to keep it. And even if you keep it and do well during your whole lifetime, it's really hard to pass it to the next generation. And hardest of all is passing wealth to future generations without messing them up. We're going to dig into this a little deeper. You've probably observed this. You know that there's something out there called a trust baby. And if somebody's called a trust baby, that's not a compliment. That's usually an insult. It means what? That they're self-indulgent, that they live on somebody else's money, they don't produce anything useful, and they make really catastrophically stupid life decisions, like showing up in public with no underwear on. It's just not a good thing to be a trust baby. At the same time, and this is interesting, there are families that have, for many, many generations over the span of hundreds of years, been able to create enormous fortunes, protect and preserve those fortunes, pass them on to future generations, and turn out generation after generation of highly productive, powerful, effective individuals. And oh, by the way, the families that do that best are often not on the radar. They're not the ones that you read about in the media. So the goal of the kind of planning I do as an attorney and that we focus on is to get people as far up that money pyramid as we can. We want you to make good money. We want you to keep it. We want you to be able to enjoy it during your lifetime. That's the live well part. And then the leave a legacy part is not just leave money to kids. In fact, one of the worst ideas that comes out of estate planning is that this is a way to give my children money. That is not healthy or positive. So leaving the legacy, there's a financial component to that, a property component to that necessarily. But for it to actually be a legacy to future generations, whether it's your own children or nieces and nephews, or you have no children and just want to make the world a better place, there's some principles and there's some ideas we need to follow. And I should mention, by the way, all of you, when you came in the door, you should have gotten an evaluation form. We invite you to fill that out. I was supposed to say this earlier. If you fill that out and turn that in, we will give you a free copy of the Bombshell Battle Plan written by my friend and compadre, David and Todd Phillips. Todd is in the back here. Hi, Todd. And you can come see us at our booth, 423. We invite you to do so, and we invite you to come visit with us. We can visit with you here. While we're here, we're going to be here for the duration. But we can also set appointments and talk if you need to schedule a specific time. Just come and catch us between things. So guess what? We are on the verge of the largest transfer of wealth that we know about in human history. More money is going to fewer people than ever before. And in spite of that huge amount of money that is passing, only 57% is going to make it to Generation 2. And out of that amount, only 10% makes it to Generation 3. Well, what happens to it? Where does it go? And why does it not stay in the family? And even when it does stay in the family, why does it do bad things to the family? And how can we both maximize the amount of wealth that stays in our family and grows and is protected, and minimize the damage it does to them, so that receiving that inheritance, whatever it is actually a good thing and not a bad thing? And we want to focus on that. And by the way, that's a different way of thinking about estate planning than other people generally think about. So I'm going to introduce some ideas here, and I want you to think about this, because this is really funky. A lot of people get tripped up on this. What's better, tax deferred or tax free? I hear people say all the time, "Oh, I have an IRA and it's tax free." No, it's not tax free. IRAs, traditional IRAs, and 401ks are tax deferred. Even annuities. "Oh, I have an annuity, it's tax free." No, it's tax deferred. There will be a tax. And when that tax is paid, will determine the rate at which it is paid. So timing the tax and timing the rate is pretty significant. So there's all these kind of taxes that we don't think about because they happen a long time in the future. And here's some of the big ones. Capital gains tax. We don't think about capital gains tax today because if I don't have a taxable event, if I'm not selling that highly appreciated asset, I don't pay it. So it's kind of, out of sight, out of mind. We don't think about it. Same with estate taxes. Who's going to pay estate taxes? Dead people. How many dead people do we have here today? Raise your hand if you're dead. Nobody raising their hand. Bummer. Okay. Actually, that's a good thing. Thank you. No dead people allowed, please. And then overfunded retirement accounts. That's an interesting idea. How can you have too much money in your retirement accounts? And the answer is yes, you can. Here's how you know. And I'm going to express a simple principle here. The I in IRA stands for individual. The statutory and policy purpose of IRAs is to finance and pay for the retirement of an individual. And we will include in that individual a married couple. So husband and wife, or whatever the married couple configuration is, a married couple can support each other with that IRA. But if you have more money in the IRA than you need to pay for your retirement, it's overfunded. How do you know if you have more money than you need to pay for your retirement? Here's a simple answer. If you die with money in your IRA, you had too much money in it. You obviously didn't spend it. IRAs are the least tax-efficient vehicle on the planet to transfer wealth. And the efficiency, the tax efficiency of IRAs is getting worse, not better. Because the politicians know this. They know that, hey, guess what? This money you have in your retirement accounts, it's partly the government's. And the government's really grateful for you to take really good care of those retirement accounts so that when you die or otherwise have to withdraw the money, they can come collect their share, but they're going to come collect their share. So we want to look at some other things. Now, everybody's heard of, there's tax-free things that happen in our current system of government. Lots of tax-free things. And we know the obvious one, religious organizations, which are both recognized by the Constitution and by specific statute. And we know all the 501, that's a section of the code, entities. The most commonly known one is the 501c3, the tax-exempt organization, which most charities qualify for that. But a lot of people have no idea about 7702. In fact, I'll give a free book to anybody except for some conspicuous people who know who they are, who can tell me what the 7702 section of the code refers to. Do you know? Yes. Kabang! Yes! The internal buildup of cash value of life insurance policy. Come to the booth. We'll give you something free for that. Thank you. Most people don't have no idea about that. So just saying, as a lawyer, I don't sell life insurance. You can't buy it from me. I never get paid if you ever use life insurance. But when we're looking at the overall plan, we're trying to get tax efficiency. That was one of the things we build with this presentation. Tax efficiency. Having life insurance as one of the asset classes that you use in your overall strategy is extremely powerful. And in fact, some of the literature that you're going to get when you come to our booth and some of the things we'll talk about as we visit privately will focus on how do you turn otherwise taxable things into non-taxable things. So here's kind of another idea that kind of wigs people out. Because taxes are cumulative. They compound. Your income gets taxed when you make it. Then you go to the store and you buy something and you pay a sales tax. And the company that manufactured whatever that thing is that you bought, they paid taxes to manufacture that. They pay their employees and their employees pay taxes. And then you get this widget or whatever it is you bought while you're alive with your after-tax money. And let's just say it might be something that goes up in value like a house. You make your house payments and then your house goes up in, does it go up in value or in price, by the way? It does not go up in value. That's a tricky thing. Houses, the value is intrinsic. The intrinsic value of a house doesn't change over time. It goes up in price. And I'm seeing somebody vigorously disagree with me. John, yeah, it's not a change in value, it's a change in price. And as the price of your real estate goes up, it's typically a consequence of inflation. And you can make money with inflation, but that's a different value. So you build up this value during your lifetime, and then you die. Guess what? What's the probability of death? 100%. 100%. There's no way out of this alive. Life will kill you. When you die, and your assets transfer to someone else, because dead people don't get to own things, your assets transfer to somebody else, there's a tax on that transfer. Now, curiously, why does the federal government in particular tax the transfer of wealth? And the answer is, interestingly enough, constitutional. Here we are at FreedomFest. It's constitutional. The federal government is not allowed to tax property. That function is left to the states. But they can tax the transfer of property. They can tax income, because it's not property until you have it. So they can't just tax you for having money in the bank, although there's some politicians that have tried that. It really doesn't work under the Constitution as long as we follow the Constitution, which hopefully continues to happen. So when we die, our assets are going to go to somebody else, and that transfer is a taxable event. And there's an exemption amount, and you all know this. I'm sure you all know this. Currently, that exemption amount is the highest it's ever been historically. It's at $12 million and change per person. And if you're married, a married couple, you each get that $12 million and change. So you get some $24 million and change. If the politicians do absolutely nothing, by the way, and we keep the law on the books that we have right now, the law changes in 2026, and that $12 million and change, with all the inflation adjusters, will come out somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million and change. We don't know the exact number yet, because we don't know what inflation is, because it's indexed for inflation. So unless you're feeling lucky and you're going to die before 2026, with the law on the books right now, the exemption that you have to plan for is about $6 million each. Again, a married couple double that. Every penny you have above that, you pay a tax. And so think about that. We're going to pay this death tax on that. And that exemption amount, I should add, by the way, is highly political. It changes over and over and over again. It's changed 7 or 8 times in the last dozen years. And it will change again. The politicians will change it. So, and how much is the tax, by the way? To the extent that you're over the tax, it starts at about 35%, goes up to about 45%. So it depends on how much over the line you are. The marginal rate, rough rule of thumb, 45%. And it, by the way, it applies to worldwide assets. People think, oh, well, I have this money in, here we are at the FreedomFest, and you can walk out there in the booth and you can put money in Belize, you can put money in many places all around the world. Guess what? Your estate taxes apply to all those assets everywhere they are. And every generation pays it. So Daddy Warbucks and Trophy Bride pay it when they die. Generation 2 pays it when they die. Generation 3 pays it when they die. And by the way, that's an optional thing. It is completely optional. I say that. How about that? This is another little gotcha out there. There's probably no resident aliens here, although there might be. I'll just mention this. If you are legally in the United States and you have a green card, you are authorized to work in the United States, you pay the estate tax. Only your exemption is really little instead of as big as it is for citizens. And there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to avoid that. And I'm going to mention some of these just so that you're thinking about them. You can do gifts. There's annual amounts that you can give to your children. You can get discounting if you're giving them interest in limited partnerships, for example. You can discount the value for lack of marketability, lack of control. You can do sales to defective trust. And if you don't know what some of these things are, come talk to me. The Sam Walton move, I really love this move. I got to tell you just this briefly, this story. Everybody knows who Sam Walton is, right? Richest guy in the world when he died. Billions and billions of dollars. He was so stinking rich, they carved his estate up 5 ways, and those 5 people became the top 5 richest people in the world for a while. Now, the numbers have moved around since then. Now, he died in a year when the estate tax exclusion was $600,000. So every penny over $600,000 was subject to a tax. How much did Sam Walton's estate pay in estate taxes? And the answer is 0. That happened because of how he structured his assets, which is highly significant. So you can, in fact, structure your assets so that when you die, your family or your designated beneficiaries, whoever they are, if you don't have children, it can be other things, that money stays where you want it to go, and you get to decide what happens to it instead of turning the control and the decision over to the politicians. I call that kind of multi-generational planning, dynasty planning, because we're going to build something that's going to last for a long, long time. Now, interestingly enough, this last week I had a meeting with a woman of Asian descent. And we're talking about dynasty planning, and she says, what? You Americans, nobody in America talks about dynasty planning. In my culture, she said, we get the dynasty thing. We understand that we have long-term plans. And I said, yeah, we have, my law firm, we have a 500-year plan. Because we're going to be here, even when all the people presently living are all dead and gone, we're going to have a structure, an organization serving the clients who have done this kind of planning so that they have the help they need to move on. And by the way, an interesting little quirk in the law, for a long, long, long time in U.S. law, when we had entities, whether they were a trust or a business entity or whatever, it had to have a termination date. It had to have an expiration date. There's this archaic rule called the rule against perpetuities that says, yeah, something can't last forever. It's got to end. It's got to be done. Over, fini. And some time ago, and I'm not going to tell the story because it's just too long, but a state, one of the states said, why do we have that rule? What a dumb rule. And this actually happened because a lawyer in that state made a bunch of mistakes and prepared thousands of trusts that did the rule wrong, got it all wrong. And rather than fixing several thousand of his trusts, it was easier to go to the state legislature and say, why do you throw out this rule against perpetuities? And they did. And amazingly enough, the unintended consequence was people with money started bringing their money to that state. And then other states go, hey, that was a good idea. So the count now, depends on how you count it, to one degree or another, it's a little more than half of the states have abolished or dramatically reduced that rule against perpetuity. So we can have a trust or a business entity last, theoretically, forever. That's kind of a cool thing. So we can plan on that. We can build on that. Now, I want to add this one thing. Some time ago, I was with my family in Egypt, and we had this really cool tour guide, and he brings us to this big monolith. It was a piece of rock about 8 feet wide and 2.5 feet thick and about 14 feet tall. And he says, let me tell you what this says. And he said, this rock says, from here to the Nile River, this land belongs to, and he named this guy, I don't even know who it was, this ancient Egyptian. It belongs to him and his descendants, tax-free in perpetuity forever. I was always kind of blown away by that. Hey, that's a dynasty trust. That's a perpetual trust. Where is this dude? Nobody knows. He's been gone for thousands of years. But the point is, even back then, they were thinking about this. So do we really know what's going to happen thousands of years from now? No. But can we plan for it? Can you think of any human institutions that have been here for 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, a couple thousand years? There are some. What enabled them to last? What enables them to persist? Yeah, you get all that. Let me move on here. So, one thing I want to introduce here. Here's an idea, a concept that we're going to introduce, and that is the idea of a dynasty trust. And we're going to unpack this a little bit. But very specifically, a dynasty trust is a trust that plans to work, to function, to do its job for a long, long, long time, for multiple generations. And this is kind of like, the reason I got this ladder against the wall here, tactics are knowing how to climb the ladder. You got to have tactics. Strategy is making sure that the ladder is leaning against the right wall. Logistics is making sure that the guy who's supposed to deliver the ladder gets the right ladder to the right wall on time. So when we do this kind of planning, we want to have good strategy. We want that ladder on the right wall. We want to know tactics. We need to know how to climb it. And we want to make sure that the right ladder gets to the right thing at the right time. So here's some ideas with dynasty trusts, and I want to fit them into a context because the dynasty trust doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's related to things. We call that integrated planning. If you look on my business card, you'll see integrated planning. Here's what we mean. And these are not specific entities necessarily. These are ideas. How they're implemented at any particular family or business situation will be different. But the dynasty trust is where we have succession, where we're going to build this structure so it lasts as long as you want it to. The family office, anybody here with a family office that's willing to admit it? Okay. Family office is an up-and-coming thing. The more wealth you have, the more you'll want and benefit by a family office. That's where we have control, generally. The family bank is where we have ownership and equity. And the family foundation is where we have influence. So we're going to talk about these 4 things in some detail, specifically as it relates to living well, leaving a legacy, minimizing taxes, family succession, and protecting assets. So most traditional estate planning, in fact, I'm going to guess here, if you're a typical audience, probably 60 or 70% of you have a trust. There's a certain percentage of you that don't even know what's a trust. And even those of you that have a trust, more than half of you that have a trust, your trust is badly out of date and hasn't been reviewed for a long time. So trusts are pretty common. What the heck are trusts? A trust is a vehicle to manage property. And it's a contract that controls property over time. As a contract, there's 3 parties: the grantor who creates the trust, the trustee that runs the trust, and the beneficiaries who enjoy the trust. And with traditional estate planning, that trust looks at and focuses on death. What happens when the owner of the trust dies? And there's, in fairness, these tools that I've got up here that I've listed here, a trust and funding the trust and the pour-over will and powers of attorney and all that kind of stuff, everybody needs those. Those are good things to have. But I want you to think about this. Is there a difference between cars? Is there a difference between the Model A that came out, when was that, in 1915 or whenever it was?
Model A was 1929.
1929, thank you. See, I knew somebody would know that better than me. Is there a difference between that 1929 Model A and a contemporary, I don't know, Mercedes-Benz or Lexus or even a Tesla or something like that? There's a huge difference. They do different things. So today, we can do things with trusts that are way more powerful, way cooler, way more durable, that give us far more benefit than we used to do. So I want to specifically lay this out. Death-focused estate planning. I often call these documents single-use, throwaway documents. We use them during the lifetime of one person, then we toss them out. So they're focused on death. When somebody dies, we're going to divide it all up. We're going to dump it out. We're going to give it to the kids. Yeah, mommy and daddy are dead. Give the kids the money. And we're going to defer all the tough decisions. In fact, I've been to continuing legal education seminars for lawyers, and they say, oh, this is a really hard decision to make. And if you try to explain this to your clients, they won't understand it. So just leave that out of the trust. And you can either rely on the state statute, or you can go to court and litigate to have a judge decide after mommy and daddy are dead, because it's much easier then. And oh, by the way, the lawyers make a lot more money. I just really detest it when lawyers don't make the hard decisions. And there's going to be fights. What's the probability of a fight over the estate of someone that has died? How often does that happen? Just saying so that you know. The percentage rate, the fight rate over estates is about the same as the divorce rate. Slightly more than half the time estates end up in conflict. So what happens to the stuff? It goes away. This is why only 57% makes it to generation 2 and only 10% makes it to generation 3. They divided it up. They ripped it all to pieces. They fought over it. The lawyers got a big chunk. The IRS got a big chunk because they weren't planning. Now, does this happen, by the way, does this happen because the tools were bad? I don't think so. It often happens because the family's catastrophically unprepared. So, that last thing. The family then becomes dependent. This is my D list, death-focused, all the Ds. They become dependent. They become entitled. Oh, that's my money, I'm entitled to it. And when their inherited money runs out, they look to some other source for the entitled benefits that they think they ought to get. The government, or, hey, I'll persuade the politicians to steal money from my neighbor and give it to me because I'm obviously entitled to it. My neighbor has more than they need, so it's only fair that the government should take their money. Can I say something like that at FreedomFest? I can, right? Okay. So that happens. So what's the difference with dynasty estate planning? Well, let's contrast that. Instead of being death-focused, it's going to be a living, dynamic plan. What does dynamic mean? It means it's going to change over time. If you're alive, the probability of change is 100%. So a living plan is going to change over time. We're not going to divide it up. We're going to keep it all together. We're not going to let them split it up. And we're not just going to dump it out and give it to the kids. We're going to save it. We're going to set it aside. And we are going to go ahead and make the tough decisions, but more importantly, we're going to help generation 2 and 3 learn how to make tough decisions so that when the decisions that we have never even thought of yet come up in the future, they'll know how to make them. Instead of fighting over it, we're going to help them collaborate and work together. And instead of just diluting it until it's worth nothing, we're going to grow it, build it, make it bigger. And lastly, we're going to help the family be self-governed. Now, here we are at FreedomFest. Is self-government a good thing? Would you rather have the people who receive your estate make their own way in the world and make their own decisions and govern themselves? Or do you want a court or a judge or even you to tell them what to do? So I want to be clear. Dynasty planning is not about ruling from the grave. It's about creating a structure and a value system that enables people and empowers people to govern themselves. So what does that look like? How do we make that go? And I want you to think about some things here. Because this kind of planning happens in the context of real life. In fact, I want to put this to the group. What's the single biggest event that can impair your wealth? People talk about asset protection all the time. What's the number one risk that puts your wealth in harm's way?
Divorce.
Divorce, thank you. Divorce. Number one. You want to protect your assets? Marry well and stay married. We're celebrating number 40 years. And I heard Ben Stein say, 62 years of marriage. Did you hear that on stage today? 62 years of marriage. And he talked about how marriage is a gift from God and how it blesses and saves us. Marry well and stay married. The single biggest predictor of poverty in the world, the single biggest, number one, what is the number one cause of people growing up in poverty? And that is having only one parent. Number three that blows our wealth away are lawsuits. And where do most lawsuits come from? Not from the outside, from the inside. They happen in the family, in the business. Way down on the list is medical issues, and there's things we can do for that. Disability and special needs, spendthrifts, substance abuse, car accidents. What's the probability that those things are going to happen in the lives of you or your family members? Pretty darn high. So institutionally, structurally, one of the things we can do with the kind of planning we're talking about here is we can protect against that. So if and when it does happen, we have mechanisms that keep the wealth safe from the people and keep the people safe from the wealth so that neither one is able to abuse the other. So I want to just hit on this dynasty trust idea for a minute, and there's a ton here that I'm going to go through really quick. In fact, I'm just going to throw all this stuff up here so that you can see it. A dynasty trust, if we're going to have a trust that theoretically could last forever, or at least for a long time, we need to load it up. We need to put tools in it. It's got to be funded, by the way. And number one mistake I see with estate planning generally, people will say, oh yeah, I have a trust. Well, does it own your assets? Oh, well, yeah. I think somebody mentioned that, but I never quite did that. My law firm, we do a lot of probates because of people who, they paid good money for a trust but then never funded it. And then we need a mechanism within that trust to resolve conflict. We need a mechanism to protect the assets in the trust from the creditors and liabilities of the beneficiaries. Distributions, by the way, this is a huge one. People go, oh, yeah, my kids might blow the money, so I'm going to make them wait. I'm going to give them some when they turn 35, some when they turn 40, and some when they turn 45. That's called age-based mandatory distributions. Let me tell you why that's a dumb idea. Even though my guess is that most of you that have a trust, that's what you did in your trust, and I'm sorry if I just offended you by telling you it was dumb. Here's why it's dumb. Age is a poor predictor of when people are able to handle money. Somebody who's perfectly capable of handling it when they're 24 and life is beautiful and they've never had a problem yet could be catastrophically unable to handle it when they're 42 and they've had a medical crisis or a marital problem or a business failure. Something nasty's happening in their life and suddenly this otherwise intelligent person is temporarily stupid. So why do we tie distributions to birthdays? Distributions should be discretionary. We should protect the principal. Or some other things here I don't want to mention. Let me mention this one. The jurisdiction, independence, and portability. We represent clients all over the United States, in all 50 states, and many foreign countries. And here's what we find. People don't live in one place. Their kids don't live in one place. They live in all these different places. They have property in all these different places. I talked to somebody today who was describing their kids are in 4 different states and they have property in like 7 or 8 different states. So where should the trust be? Well, it should not depend upon any one place. It should be able to work in any place. And it should be able to move to the place where it works best. Now, this is really hard for the attorney who represents clients within a 5 or 10 mile of their office and has never done anything outside the county where they live. They don't do that. Because we speak at events like this and have people that we work with all over the country, we're accustomed to dealing with, oh yeah, children in 4 different states, property in 7 different states, all these business entities in all these different states. Yeah, we know how to handle that. So a well-crafted trust will deal with all that. I want to show you, by the way, a meaning of dynasty from a tax perspective. This is huge. Now, we mentioned earlier that when we die, the transfer of wealth from one generation to the next is a taxable event. So let's think through how that works over a long time. And we're going to make some assumptions. We're going to start with $5 million at death, and we're going to assume that's exempt. Excuse me, let me look at that. No, generation one's got $10 million. The death exemption is $5 million. So you can see with the no dynasty trust, at every generation, there's a tax. And we assumed 24-year generations, 3% growth, and 45% marginal tax, and a $5 million exclusion. Those are some big assumptions that may not apply. But after 100 years, with the estate tax being paid at each generation, that wealth grew to $35 million. Over the same 100 years, if we don't pay the estate tax, that same little nest egg of $5 or $10 million grows to $160 million. There are families, very wealthy families, who did this kind of planning 100 years ago, who today have enormous amounts of wealth, and also have really highly effective, pretty decent human beings in their family. So once again, it's fair to ask, how did they get there? We can have this structure. The Dynasty Trust can provide that tax structure. It's like the hardware. Then we need the software to make it work. I want to mention a few things about the family office here, and I want to get through this quickly so we have some time to answer questions. Typically, but not always, this is going to be a business entity. It's going to be taxed as a C or an S corp, depending on what's going on. It's going to be owned in such a manner that it's mostly out of the taxable estate and unavailable to creditors. And I know this is a little technical, more technical than I want to get. And the family office will typically not own any assets of any significance. It might own liabilities like vehicles or things that are dangerous, but it's not going to own the investments. What do we do in the family office? We control, we manage, we run the business. One of the principles, by the way, this is super important. One of the things that families do that successfully create long-lasting wealth is they give young people in the family at an early age positions of responsibility and leadership. They let them make mistakes, because it's much better to make a $10,000 mistake than it is to make a $10 million mistake. So in giving them leadership and responsibility, they have to have room to screw up and not be judged for that. The families that do the worst with wealth are a couple of factors. One, when Daddy Warbucks keeps a tight grip on that money, and it's not until he's 92 and he finally kicks the bucket and he dies, and his children, who are all in their 60s and 70s and have never managed anything in their life, go, wait, I'm in charge now? And they have no clue what to do. They're completely unprepared. And it's late in life, it's too late to learn. The families that do the best are the families that, from an early age, the kids, yeah, you're running this business. Come ask me questions. Let's train you, let's coach you, let's counsel you so you can run that. The family office is a venue for doing that. The family office, by the way, is also a place where you're going to consolidate third-party services. You may have accounting or tax reporting or financial investment management or legal services and other things like that that you run through the family office. The family bank is where we're going to put the equity and the value. And again, there's not one particular structure that could be, this could be, frankly, a cash value life insurance policy. It could be a limited partnership. It could be an LLC, depending on what's going on in the family. But it's typically going to be owned in such a way that it's out of the taxable estate and unavailable to the creditors, which is super cool. If you're going to create wealth long-term, you are going to have business activities, even if nothing else, investment type activities. And we're going to do that in the family. And the family bank, because this is where we have the equity, how do we help family members grow when they're in generation 2 and generation 3? Do we just give them money? No. Do banks just give you money? If you go to the bank and say, hey, I need money. Can you give me some? You got some. Can you give me some? What do they say? No. But they'll make you a loan, right? And if they are going to loan you money, you have to be a good credit risk. You have to have some collateral. There has to be a reasonable expectation that you can repay that money. Now, in a family setting, That can be easier to make happen. Okay, family member with business idea, with a property acquisition. What is it you're wanting to acquire? And I'll just tell you one story. I have a client, a very wealthy client, who actually I met at this event some years ago, who has 3 children. I'm only going to tell stories of one of the children. One of his children, when he did this kind of planning, said to her father, "Dad, don't insult me with your money. Don't you dare give me any of your money. I don't want it." How rude. Don't you think I can make my own money? I can make my own money without your money. And so she has. And she's done very well. Now here's the trick. Even though she said she didn't want Daddy's money, she leveraged Daddy's money. When she went to buy the big apartment complex and she needed the down payment, she got it from Daddy. And Daddy secured that loan with a mortgage against the apartment building. And then she got traditional financing for the rest. And she paid Daddy back. Daddy got his money back. She doesn't have Daddy's money anymore, but now she owns the apartment complex. And that was the first of many. So this can create, the family bank not only holds the family wealth, it creates opportunities for entrepreneurship and for next generation training. Now, I got to mention this, the Family Foundation. Families that have a healthy relationship with money have a culture of charitable giving. They do it together and they do it on purpose. And there are several reasons for this, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, however you want to describe it. One of the things is when you are actively involved in using your wealth to make other people's lives better, you come to realize that the function and the purpose of the wealth that I have been fortunate enough to receive is not just to buy me a luxurious lifestyle. The function and purpose of that wealth is for me to be an agent to do good in the world. And so that becomes part of the family culture, which is extremely powerful, by the way. And I've seen this even in generation 3 and 4 when they're considering a business enterprise. Wait, should we go down this path where we're going to create this corporate entity which is going to exploit resources and ruin the underprivileged and strip money out of this developing country? Or are we going to go down this path where we have sustainable development, where we enrich the population, where we create jobs and opportunities, and we create sustainable products that people actually use and enjoy? People make fundamentally different decisions when their mindset is on the idea that, oh, hey, yeah, I have money, or I have access to capital. I can do something with it, and the purpose of that is to make the world a better place. We do that through the Family Foundation. One of the things you can come learn about at our booth is how to create a family foundation. It's actually not that hard anymore. It's pretty easy, pretty inexpensive. Melody Gatz, who's in the back here, can help you learn how to do that, which is an exciting thing. So here we have these four ideas, these 4 concepts that can be 4 structures. The Dynasty Trust, the Family Office, the Family Bank, the Family Foundation. And they got to work together. And does everybody need all of these? No. If you don't have children, for example, your needs are different than somebody that has a whole bunch of children. So we want to design a plan that fits your particular situation. And we will use these tools to build a plan that fits for you. So when we're trying to do a dynasty plan, how do we empower the family? How do we empower future generations, even if it's not our children? What do we do? And one thing is we have to plan for the long term. Like that young woman I met with this last week of Chinese descent who said, yeah, my family, in our culture, in our language, in our way of thinking about things, we understand what it is to have a 500-year plan. That's a new way of thinking for some of us. It's really crucial that we not just give people money. We can provide them access to capital, which is different than just giving them money. We got to throttle the burn rate. How fast are we going to let generation 2 and 3 and 4 burn the money? We can cap that. We can throttle it. We can hold that back, which is not, again, not ruling from the grave. It's just saying, yeah, this is mine. You can have it for things that are healthy and positive and good. You cannot have it to do stupid things. I'm going to emphasize this too. In fact, I encourage you to go to my website, which I'm going to tell you in a minute here. We have several articles and videos on family councils. Everybody gets it. If you're going to have a big company, you're going to have like a board of directors, right? Even depending on the corporate structure, a board of directors. And what do? They counsel. They set policy. They set goals and strategy. And they hire the people that run the country. Your family, if you're going to create long-lasting wealth, if you're going to train generation 2 and 3 how to function as adults in a big world with scary things happening, you need to be functioning as a family council. And there's some very cool materials on our website about how to do that. And that's something, by the way, we help families do. That's part of the consulting and services we provide. You got to keep them out of the courtroom. You got to have a family business. If you don't own a business, you're paying more in taxes than you need to. And we mentioned putting family members to work early and growing things and create a culture of charitable giving. All these things we've mentioned, we've talked about, this is kind of a summary a little bit here. All of these things can help you and your family live well and leave a legacy. And here's the deal. So much of planning, business planning, tax planning, estate planning, all this planning focuses on the money. We like to turn that around and focus on the people. We still need structures. We still have to make financial decisions. We still have to have investments. We still have to have trusts and LLCs and limited partnerships. But when we build those and design those and structure those from the perspective of what's going to be best for the people instead of what's going to be best for the money, it completely changes what the structure is that we end up with and how we use it in the process. So I'm done with my prepared presentation. There's my phone number. There's my website, durfeelawgroup.com. I also have up here EPMEZ, Estate Planning Made Easy, for David and Todd Phillips, who were here at our booth, 423. Come by and see us. Come by and schedule something. And because that is the end of my formal presentation, I will now open it up for any questions or rude comments or anything somebody wants to throw at me. Or if you got good jokes. Anything. Yes?
Where do you start seeing today folks getting interested in putting together a family office?
Yeah, the question, where do I see people start getting interested in a family office? A couple of triggers. Sometimes it's a net worth trigger. Oh, I have enough money. I need these services. Sometimes it's a complexity trigger. I don't have that much money yet, but I got a lot going on. I got these multiple business enterprises going. I need to be able to centralize services and have control. Sometimes it's a family issue. Yeah, I don't have money, and I don't have a lot of business, but I got all these kids, and I need to be teaching my kids how to do stuff. Candidly, I started my family office when my net worth, when I was candidly, if I did a balance sheet, I was probably insolvent. I probably had more liabilities than assets. But I had children. And you know what my children did? 3 nights a week, they went and cleaned the toilets in the office building. And now those children who are adults said, Dad, you know, by the way, one of the best things you ever did for me is you taught me how to work. So multiple triggers. And by the way, with the family office, I think a lot of people believe they have a family office. They've been told they have a family office, and in fact, they don't have a family office. What they have done is they've purchased a bundle of services from someone who markets it as a family office, and it's not really a family office. So one of the indicators to know if you really have a family office is you will own a business entity. It will be integrated in your estate plan. Now that business entity, which will be structured both to protect assets, to protect control, and to have a good succession when somebody dies, that entity may employ financial advisors and accountants and lawyers and other service providers, but you're gonna own the business, not just have, oh yeah, we have this service over here and there are concierge financial people, they do all this stuff for us. That's not a family office. And I get some pushback from some people who sell those kind of family offices who don't like me saying that, but I feel strongly about that. So I've seen entrepreneurs early on in their career, their families are young, they're just starting out, they form a family office. Because, in fact, I'll tell you this story. I had a guy come to me, this was like 30 years ago now. A guy come to me who he just graduated from college. He had a good job with a big corporation that had a huge upside for his income potential. And he said to me, he said, Rick, I want you to help me put together a plan that I would need if I had tens of millions of dollars. And I said, dude, You don't have tens of millions of dollars. In fact, you have student debt. You're broke. You can't even afford me. Why do you want this? And this is what he said. He said, I want this because my clientele that I'm going to be working with in my business are people who have that or need that. And I can't talk to them about it intelligently if I don't have it myself and haven't used it myself. So I said, okay, here's the bill. And he said, okay, and he paid it. And we set it up. Now, this is the interesting thing. This was about 30 some odd years ago. I remember clearly when we signed the documents, he goes, okay, Rick, he said, you've helped me create the box. I'm going to go fill it up. And he did. So when do you need it? Yeah, that's a good question, though. Other questions? Yes?
I was wondering about the family bank. Is that a legal construct, or how do you fund the bank, or how does it compare to a typical bank?
Great question. It's not actually a bank, because an actual bank is a regulated entity that has to comply with both state and federal rules. So we don't want to be subject to those rules. But it is the place where we put the good stuff, where we put the cash, the investments, the portfolio assets, the rental properties, the business things, and what entity is appropriate kind of depends on where you're at and what you have. So for example, in a very simple situation where all you have to work with is some excess cash, your family bank might be a cash value life insurance policy. In a different situation where we're doing asset protection and there's rental properties and there's portfolio assets and there's different partners in different deals, it might be a limited partnership or an LLC. And that structure, if we have a legal entity, that structure will again be owned, integrated to the plan. And let me just mention this, because this happens a lot. If you have the limited partnership, for example, or an LLC, this is true with either one, who should be the owners of that? Should it be the people? It should be the trust, never the people. Why do we not make people the owners? This is an easy one if you think about it. What happens with people? Well, first of all, they die. They're mortal. They get sick. They're not going to be here forever. They have marital problems and medical problems and judgment problems. So if you make people the partners in your limited partnership or the members in your LLC, you are inviting trouble. So the members or the partners, the limited partners and the general partners will be trust entities or other business entities. And that's part of the magic that goes into structuring this. By the way, at my booth, I have a diagram that kind of lays out some examples of ways this might be structured in some typical things. But it's also been my experience that every family ends up with something that is uniquely structured to fit their particular situation. Yes?
How quickly does the structure you're talking about become obsolete?
So, a great question. How quickly does the structure become obsolete? That is a great question. We have to be, I mentioned in the beginning, it's a living in a dynamic structure. So we have to be responsive. The tax laws change, family members change. So I have had families, let me give you, because I've been doing this long enough, where we set up structures in the 80s or the 90s, and then their family moved on. And in fact, I'll give you one example. That I had a client who sold a business in the early 90s for a lot of money. And then for a variety of reasons, that money never grew. It stayed flat. There were some investment decisions, there were some family dynamics going on, and there was never any new structures. So things that we did in the 90s to prevent estate taxes, 30 years later, we unwound. We said, yeah, you don't need that anymore. We needed it then, 30 years ago. It was important then, but it's not needed now. So we actually simplified it and rolled it into a single entity. Now there's a single trust that has all the assets of what used to be in 8 or 9 different entities. So sometimes we go down, we simplify. Other times, in fact, these young entrepreneurs are like this. They go, yeah, 3 years ago I had 4 entities. 2 years ago I had 12 entities. Last year I had 19 entities. This year I think I'm going to have 32. Oh, we're constantly changing those. So obsolescence depends on the the trajectory. Are we going up or down in value? The family, is the family growing? Is the family not growing? You know, if we run out of people, I've had that happen too. Whoa, you know, there's only one person in generation 3. We can simplify a heck of a lot for that one person. Or on the other hand, some of these big families in the Rocky Mountain West, they go, yeah, now there's 96 people in generation 3. Well, okay, we need to do something about that. So, yeah, obsolescence is an individual thing. Other questions? Well, I think we're over time, by the way. Anybody who needs to leave can. You will not offend me if you get up and walk out. I don't think there's anybody after us in this room, so unless somebody comes in here and yells at me, we'll keep going as long as people have questions. Yes?
Yeah, how do you keep the assets in the family bank out of the estate?
How do you keep the assets in the family bank out of the estate? I love that question. Thank you for asking that question. On my diagram here, this thing that, let me back up here, see if I can go back here. I want to show you, oh, I'm going to come back here. Oh, yeah, see that? See where those dynasty trusts, one is blue and one is green? And if you come and see the diagram I have at my booth, we have a revocable trust that will be in the taxable estate and one or more irrevocable trusts that will be out of the taxable estate. And we structure as many assets in that irrevocable trust as it makes sense to do so. So just saying, Sam Walton, that Sam Walton move we mentioned, part of what he did is he had a series of trusts and limited partnerships which he controlled, but the equity was outside of his taxable estate. So if we're starting a new deal, so my daddy Warbucks clients that have hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, and they go, yeah, I got a new idea, and I'm going to make another $1 billion. We go, okay, let's structure that so that it's not in your taxable estate. And we can do that. Just kind of to get a little technical, we could have the general partnership interest where we have control, for example, owned by the family office, so Daddy Warbucks controls it, and the limited partnership interest completely owned outside the taxable estate by an irrevocable dynasty trust, and we can capitalize it with loans from other sources, and then we can, that next $1 billion, when Daddy Warbucks dies, is going to be completely tax-free to his heirs. I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried to. Other questions? We doing okay? So, hey, you've been a great audience. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Come by and see us at the booth, and come make an appointment. We'll be here for the rest of the time we're here, and I'd love to visit with any one of you. Thanks.
Thank you.